Oh, wow. Well,
saying Mario.
Bill, welcome to
Hey, man.
CafeBTW, a morning gaming podcast. I'm Andy, of course. Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another episode Saturday morning. Chilling with us. You might have your coffee, you might have your tea, you might be one of those water people. I don't know. Good for you. Bill down here is an awesome podcaster. I've been on his show. We're going to get into that. But Bill, thanks so much for joining us today on CafeBTW, man. It's been a long time
Hey,
coming.
greatly appreciate it. Thanks for having me. This is gonna be a lot of fun. Looking
Yeah,
forward to it.
yeah, and what I love to do on the top of my shows is, and it's very important, is I hit you with a simple question. We'll go into the podcast and what you do and all that jazz, but we're gonna go back in time. Bill, what is a story you could share with us that connects you to why you love video games and why you're on this podcast in the first place because you love video games like me, retro video games? What's a story you could share that really hit the nail on the head for you to become a gamer? What was that from your childhood?
I would say it would be the first time I felt completely immersed in a game. My first console was a Nintendo. I think I got it in '87, and I had Rad Racer and baseball. I never had Mario or Duck Hunt. I had my console didn't come with that, so I had Rad Racer and baseball, and I always played and enjoyed it. But the first game that really got its hooks in me was Metroid. And Metroid, I remember playing Metroid in the basement of my mom's house and playing it for, I believe, 6 hours straight, like beginning to end, beating it. And I've never been that immersed in something, neither TV or music or anything, because I felt so connected to what's going on. My 8, 9 year old brain, I beat the game, left the basement. I thought I saw the monsters underneath the stairs. I was like zonked out. And that really kind of it got its hooks in me. And there was other formative games after that, but Metroid was the first one that I really felt like I was in a world that I was exploring and had like all of this agency. Yeah, I remember just being enthralled by it. So I think that's the one that really got its hooks in me as far as the medium goes.
What was your childhood setup like? You said you were in your basement, just like every Jersey
Yeah,
kid.
yeah, we were all in the basement. I had a, it was a, it was like a steel cabinet thing, like more like industrial cabinet looking thing with the TV on it and the console next to it, and we had we eventually grew up to like we had like little like folding chairs, almost like school chairs, like you'd have at school to sit up and play. It was like on a lower shelf. But as we got older, we put like big lazy boys in there and stuff, and that was the hang. It was the hang. You have the washing machine and the dryer next to you, and hanging out in the basement playing games. It was great.
I have, and just so everyone knows, and you've known on the podcast here that I'm from Jersey, grew up in North Jersey. Bill and I think Bloomfield was in Bergen County, right? Or is it Essex? It might be Essex.
Essex.
It
It's
is
Essex
Essex.
County.
They're very close to each other. Whatever.
Yes, very close.
So Bill has a lot of the cultural kind of experience as a North New Jerseyan, and I think that we align on a lot of things growing up. But yeah, we all had basements. I live in California right now, and I also live in Florida where there's no one has basements. I mean, I'm pretty sure they don't have basements here because of earthquakes, and it's probably not a good idea.
That makes sense.
But I always wondered, there's a metro in LA, and I'm like, damn, I've never been in the metro and the earthquake go on. But anyway, there's kind of like a fun nostalgia about the Northeast. There were stores like, I don't know if you remember, Nobody Beats the Wiz, Bill.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was like the Best Buy of the metropolitan area, right?
Yep,
And
absolutely.
were there any other things from North Jersey, now that we're on that topic, that remind you as a kid? Like, did you go to Toys R Us, pull the tickets? Like, what was your video game buying experience in Jersey?
Toys R Us for sure was a big one. My dad used to work at a department store. You might remember this, Bradley's.
Yeah,
Do
of
you remember
course.
Bradley's?
Of
Yeah.
course.
So I would get a lot of games from there. I think they had like some games there, but my yeah, it was definitely a lot of, especially as I got older, when I was able to drive and get myself places. A lot of Funko Land, a lot of Electronics
Ooh,
Boutique.
Funko Land.
I remember when Best Buy first came to Jersey. I think I was in college or maybe right before, and I remember thinking Lost Circuit City to get stuff like that, and definitely Toys R Us for, like you said, pulling the little tag, because they didn't have the actual games there. You had to pull the tag and go to the counter. But as I got older, definitely it was lots of like a Funko Land and Electronics Boutique was where I went.
And I loved Electron Boutique. And what was cool about Electron Boutique is you would go in there and they'd be wearing nice shirts and ties, the
Yep.
employees.
Yeah.
Then that not only had video games, they had amazing big box selections of PC games. You could also go there to get like your Sound Blaster.
That's right.
Electronic
Yes.
Boutique was so underrated. And, you know, I always try to like search on the internet. There's not a ton. There's photos, but you can't find like commercials. And I know that Electronic Boutique eventually turns into GameStop. There was a time where GameStop was a separate company than EB Games, which Electronic Boutique turned into EB Games. But FuncoLand, I think, also got taken over by GameStop eventually.
Yeah,
But
I believe
FuncoLand,
so.
Route 17 in New Jersey.
Yes.
Was that the FuncoLand you went to? There was one on Route 17.
That sounds familiar. I
It's probably the one.
Yeah.
My story there was we were very lucky. We went in there with my dad for my birthday, and they had a used Neo Geo console, and like we bought it, and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And I got it at FuncoLand. I still remember that day, man. Wish I can go back in time. But
All right.
Bill, I love, you know, I was on your podcast. I want to make sure that we talk about what do you do kind of to give back to this wonderful retro gaming world. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about A Gamer Looks at 40.
Yeah, man. So yeah, A Gamer Looks at 40. It's a the tagline is it's a retrospective of the history of video games as told through the stories of the people who lived it. It's sharing people's personal stories and recollections about what games impacted them, what they loved, what again the stories. Because I do think that the gaming medium sometimes is seen as just nuts and bolts, like it's a singular thing people just do as almost like a waste of time or a pastime. When gaming, especially for us as you know 40 or so adults, man, we have a history with this, and it affects our lives and it's shaped our lives in interesting ways. So that's what the show is all about, and it's about sharing those stories, eras and systems and games at a time. And we're trying to like walk through the history of games. I'm leaving myself freedom to go back. So if I'm having conversations and there's a cool Super Nintendo story and I get enough of them, cool, I'll just do another SNES episode. I'm giving myself that freedom, but it's just sharing stories, man. That's what I wanted to do. The podcast idea itself kind of came out of the blue. I've been wanting to do another podcast for a while. I've been doing shows since 2007, and I hadn't done one in a while. And we'll talk like, yeah,
that's amazing. Is there anything coming up for gamers? Gamer Looks at 40 that you want to mention?
Yeah, so we have I have the next episode is going to be about Sonic. It's all about Sonic the Hedgehog, the character, the mechanics, the games. After that, we're going to do a show about Sonic in media, which is the anime, the cartoons, the comics, the movie. And that's really just two people, my buddy Joey and Ryan, also known as Games with Coffee on Twitter.
I know Games with Coffee. Awesome.
Yeah, he's going to be on. He talks at length about this stuff. And then we're going to do probably another side quest episode. And the side quest episodes are just anything that didn't fit into an episode for whatever reason gets put there. So they're really fun grab bag of conversations about a variety of topics. Super fun. That's the next 3. And then we'll probably start dipping our toe in the N64 because we're kind of getting out of 16-bit for now. I do want to do an episode on, we also do sometimes topics. 2 weeks ago, I spoke with Greg Stewart, who is a editor at EGM, and we talked for about 45 minutes about just life at EGM behind the scenes of a video game magazine. Got into a conversation about journalistic integrity in games and influencer culture, and really cool. So I'm thinking about doing one of those that around the difficult discourse about if games are too hard, too easy, difficulty settings, accessibility. I have a couple people in mind for that. So that might lead me through halfway November, and then we'll just see.
Nice.
The cool thing about the show is that I'm just collecting interviews. And then when I get the stuff, it's a puzzle I got to put together. Like, what makes sense?
Yeah, I think your episodes are very docu style, which is awesome.
Yes.
And you did you pulled from the interview with me on a bunch of retro gaming stuff. And I think one of the coolest ones is that we talked about my Atari porn game that I own.
That's so funny.
Which was very funny because I do own, one of those early Beat 'em and Eat 'em, Lady in Waiting, the Atari 2600s porn games that were sold at Sears, by the way. It says produced and sold at Sears or in collaboration with Sears on the box.
Collaboration.
Or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
Sears should get a shout out for, they had a very good, you could buy a lot of games from Sears. And I think they had a huge Atari, Atari was a big deal with Sears and stuff.
Yep.
But really cool. And yeah, everyone just check out his podcast. It's really awesome. And if you happen to follow my Twitter, I tagged his Twitter there. We have your Twitter here. I'll make sure to include it in the VOD as well. Cool. That being said, before we get into, we're going to talk about the nostalgia of growing up with video game magazines. And it's perfect that you interviewed this gentleman from EGM. But I want to talk about podcasting because obviously podcasting is something that's meant a lot to me. And it obviously means a lot to you, Bill.
Absolutely.
How did you discover podcasting if it was that far back? We're talking 2007 when iTunes kind of introduced, like Apple invented the podcast. Can we agree? Right.
Basically, yeah. Right? Well, they incorporated the RSS feed standard and they were the first one to put together a marketplace for it. Yes. So they invented the modern podcast as we know it.
Yeah. So what was it that put your eyes towards it? How'd you even know that it was a thing?
It's a very good question. I don't remember. I think because I was a pretty big iTunes user. I had a huge collection of music, and I was a very early adopter of iPods and iTunes. And I think it just showed up in my iTunes one day, and it was all these radio shows, and it was like the Ricky Gervais show and all these different things. And like, wow, that's like a radio show. I did radio all through college, and I loved it. But of course, when I got out of college, I wasn't doing it anymore. And then I saw, like, wait, I can do like my college radio show on the internet and people just download it whenever they want. Like, that's kind of awesome. So all through college, I did a show called the Skankin' Hep Cat Show. How's that for a name?
Love it.
And it was a ska show because I was very heavily involved in the ska scene in New York and New Jersey. And I just did that show as a podcast for about 2 years. And it was fun. I was promoting on MySpace. There was no Facebook. Certainly no Twitter.
MySpace was great. Lots of that's where a lot of like bands put their schedules. Like
absolutely.
When you wanted to see, and you were in the punk hardcore scene and whatever, I would go on and see like, oh, this band's playing in Westwood on X date. Like MySpace was ahead of its day, you know.
Yes, it was. It's this band's playing at the Birch Hill, on Route 9 or Route 4, in Sayreville. Yeah, I just got all Jersey reference there. So that's what happened. And then the show kind of fitted away in like a couple of years later. And then in 2011, my buddy Joey, who, if you listen to the show, you've heard a bunch of times. We did a show called Devs Cast, which is a show in support of the New Jersey Devils. I'm a huge hockey fan. Awesome. I was a season ticket holder for years when I lived in the area. And so we did that for about a year and a half. And that was hard because I lived in New York at the time and he lived in Jersey. So we were kind of doing it over the phone. It wasn't easy to do as it is. It's much easier now to do that. So that kind of went away. And then I didn't do much podcasting until I started guesting on shows a couple of years ago. And I got the bug again. I was like, I like this. I miss this. I was focusing on writing between that point. And I'm like, I got to do it. And then the Gamer Looks at 40, the idea came in July of last year. I was literally in the shower. And I was thinking about, man, I want to do a show. What can I do that's unique? And I was listening to the song "A Pirate Looks at 40" from Jimmy Buffett. And I'm like, because it's a really beautiful, nostalgic song of somebody just looking back on a life lived. Right. And I'm like, a gamer looks at 40. And then that tagline I just said, a history of games as told through a retrospective of games from a 40-year-old. And then it's the other stories of other people. And that was it. Boom, I was off to the race. I'm like, that's the idea. That's what we're doing. Because I had a few ideas that kind of fell through, but that was the one. I'm like, I want to tell people stories. I like telling stories and giving people a venue and opportunity to share those things that people may never hear, And that was it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, then it took a while to get going because I said the show launched in, I think it was April of this year. And so it took a long time to like getting something going, you're pushing a thing uphill. That's what this show was. But I had interviewed some people in November 2020 for it, and I looked at it, and I had a different idea for it. And I looked at the stuff, and I knew it wasn't going to fit that idea, got discouraged. And then finally, I said, let me just do 4 of these episodes that I know I have enough material for. And once I started doing them, I was like, okay, now we have to do this. And away it went.
Nice. Yeah, I think we talked offline, podcasting. I was listening to podcasts as far back as 2007, and I was a big Apple enthusiast back then. I was also going to college. or I went to college and had learned how to use like Apple and Mac and Final Cut Pro 1 on so I was very after college I was very in tune with Apple even before it kind of blew up where it is today. And I remember MuggleNet, which I told you offline was a Harry Potter podcast back then, and they were like, I still have a MuggleNet shirt that I think when they first started they like were offering like to buy their shirt, and like that was the first time I ever bought a shirt associated with a podcast.
Nice.
And then we talked about Kevin Smith, the Joe Rogans who came later that really brought the celebrity into podcasting because they were realizing, oh wait, I can extend my fandom by doing a podcast.
Right. Yep.
So that's kind of where it all funneled, and you know the rest is history. But why do people love podcasts, Bill? Why do you think it is? Why do people love podcasts? Is it the convenience of is it the idea of how we used to listen to radio, but it's more of a convenience, and that's why people have always like loved podcasts? I mean, what's the thought there?
Yeah, I think it's a creative medium, and I think the on-demand part of it is really attractive to people. We don't, even though these days a lot of shows and whatnot are actually, they're serialized again. We'll release an episode of the Great British Baking Show every week, but I think there is a connection you have with audio that doesn't exist in any other medium. I think there's a personal connection you have with audio, and I've had this theory. I may have mentioned it before in other shows, but it requires one sense to get into your brain. It's not like TV that's sight and sound. And it's not like video games, which is a bunch of different senses and experiences. It's just directly in. And I think when you hear stories told audibly and hear people talking audibly, it gives you a more personal connection to those stories and to those the creators that are making that content. So I just think it gives you, it doesn't make sense because you're like, well, there's video and there's all sorts of other things that are more, technologically advanced. But I honestly think there's just that personal connection that audio creates that nothing else can.
Yeah. And I don't know if you see this on the screen. This is my old podcast. This is where it all started for me. This is our Destiny podcast. This is one of the times we actually shot an episode. We went to a studio and we shot a video episode. We never did that before, but that look at young me over here.
A young buck there.
A young buck. But so my connection to podcasting was I listened to it all the time. But in 2013, Destiny came out and I played the shit out of Destiny. I just wouldn't stop talking about it with my buddy here, Scott on the right. He's my very good friend. And what ended up happening is like, we're talking about it so freaking much. Why don't we do a podcast? And we were the second actual Destiny podcast.
That's cool.
And we're one of the OGs. And what I found out on Reddit, on the Destiny Reddit recently, is that we are still number 3 in the most podcasts ever produced for a Destiny show.
Wow. That's awesome.
Which is cool, but I'm not a part of the community much anymore. But it's what made me want to be a podcaster. And ever since then, I've been doing it. And this Twitch show is kind of like the evolution of my own podcast. I said, you know what? I'm tired of iTunes. I'm tired of SoundCloud. I'm just going to do it live on Twitch and VOD it. And that was it. Like, I just decided to try something different. Tal says, hey, Tal, she has Ed Sheeran. Oh, Scott looks like Ed Sheeran. Yeah, he sure does.
He really does.
He does. Retro Game Brew says podcasting is a far more intimate experience with content creators. Yeah, sure. And
I heard that. Yep.
You could do audio only, and there's a lot of people that don't want to do video, right? And that's okay, and that's what podcasting allows you to do. You could be a huge content creator, never show your face, and just do audio. But yeah, man, so it's really great to have you on because we share kind of like a love of podcasting, and it's been a part of both of our lives for a very long time, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
So that being said, let's get into a little bit of our topic today, and we're going to breeze through. This isn't a history lesson on retro video game magazines. This is more of a retrospective from our experiences, right? So off the bat, we're going to go back in time again, Bill, and I want to hear what is your connection to video game magazines before we kind of walk through the gambit of the existing ones that kind of were a part of our childhood.
Absolutely.
What was that story for you?
This requires a little bit of setup. So when I got my Nintendo as a kid, everyone got the Nintendo that had probably the Zapper and the Mario Duck Hunt
and the
combo
Rob
cartridge.
Was that the one with the Rob?
I don't know if Rob came with it, but I know there was one that had a zapper and then the Mario Duck Hunt combo cartridge.
Maybe that wasn't that one. Yeah.
I didn't get that. I got a system that had the control, it had the deck. It had one controller, I believe, and it came with the Nintendo Fun Club newsletter.
Yes. Yes.
Now, so I got a weird one, which was why my first two NES games were Black Box Baseball and Rad Racer, and I've never beaten Super Mario Brothers to this day. Every year I try. This year I tried on Twitch. Made it to 8-2 and I failed. So that's just my little thing. Anyway, so I got the Nintendo Power Fun Club newsletter, and my mom subscribed to it. It came bi-monthly, I think, once every couple months. It was neat, had like tips and tricks. It was mainly Nintendo propaganda. And then they sent all the subscribers of the Nintendo Fun Club magazine the first issue of Nintendo Power for free, because they moved from that model to a real serious magazine. And I remember getting that and just being, again, blown away by it. Felt like I owned all the games that were in that magazine. It was so vibrant and had the pullout of Zelda, the second quest, and it had that really cool claymation Mario on the front. It was just such a really fun experience getting that. My mom did not get me, because I think it was more expensive, so she did not get me the subscription. Or maybe I can't remember if the Nintendo Fun Club was free. I actually don't remember that, but I was too young. But anyway, she didn't get me the first year. Go ahead, sorry.
And the Nintendo, just for context, is kind of like the beginnings of the real Nintendo Power. It was marketed by Nintendo. It was free to join, Bill, okay. It says here. Okay. A member received a free subscription to Nintendo Fun Club news, periodicals, discuss popular games, and blah, 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 eventually becoming Nintendo Power. First issue, December of 1987.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep, that's exactly. I remember getting it. I remember, again, being blown away by it. And that makes sense then. My mom at that time probably didn't want to buy me another like a subscription to something. So I didn't get the first year, which I think it was still bi-monthly. But then the second year, I begged for it for Christmas and I got it. And then I had Nintendo Power for probably 10 years. I had it all the way through the console wars, through the N64, probably around GameCube era is when I jumped off that train. But yes. And somewhere in my mom's basement, there is a giant shelf. I know exactly where the shelf is. I don't know if it's been replaced by anything, that has all my Nintendo Powers in order. I'm just sitting there collecting dust. There it is.
This is the last Nintendo Power that mimics the first cover ever made.
That's cool.
So I still have this one because I remember when they made the announcement. I think it was 2012. I want to say. I was like, man, I got to get the last Nintendo Power. I got to have it, and I still have it. It's worth like, I don't know, $80 now. I'm like, Jesus.
I can imagine. I remember when. And also the big thing with Nintendo Power were also the player's guides.
Yes.
That was a big deal too. And if I remember correctly, and someone can probably just check my math on this, I believe they were still bi-monthly, but they started giving away player's guides on the alternate months. So I remember getting like the Final Fantasy player's guide, which I still have sitting upstairs, the original Final Fantasy player's guide. And there were a few of them that just came and then they started charging for them. But
here is it remember this, the official Nintendo's player's guide? Is that what we're talking about?
No. That I do remember that. I do remember that, and I think I had that. No, they were starting to send out game specific player's guides. So they sent one for Super Mario Brothers 3 that had everything you'd ever need to know about it, maps and everything from where you have the tile game in Mario 3 where you have to uncover the tiles, the memory game. It would actually give you the collection of 8 possible combinations. That way you can look at them and say, oh, that's the combination that I have right now and clear the board every time. Like, it was ridiculous how much data was in this thing. There's a Final Fantasy one, and then I don't remember the other two, but those are the two that really stuck out to me.
Now, you mentioned propaganda. But what's interesting about Nintendo Power is that literally it was propaganda because it was very biased towards Nintendo only. It was a Nintendo only magazine.
Yep.
So at the same time where they're giving you like tips and tricks and telling you about new games, they were really subliminally sticking all this marketing into your head so that you're like, oh man, the new Nintendo Power's out and look at all these new games coming out for Nintendo. Like, it was propaganda for video games and it was amazing.
Absolutely.
It was definitely like, I don't know. They did it right. Oh, go ahead, Bill.
I was gonna say they really combined the two. They combined entertainment and the advertising, and it really was an advertising arm, but it was still just a really fun read and very well put together magazine too. So
yeah, it was beautiful.
Oh yeah.
And I think that my connection to memory is, so in my old house in New Jersey, we had this like really big basement, and one of those basements that was always like half furnished or half
Yeah.
finished.
Yeah.
Like it
Yep.
always looked like it was a typical basement. Like part of it was like there was a couch, but the other part looked like it wasn't furnished and finished or whatever it might have
Yeah.
been.
That's what we had. Yeah. It
Yeah,
was, you had like the washer dryer in the corner and the
yeah.
furnace right behind you. Yeah.
Yep.
Totally.
And we had this big old CRT TV that my dad kind of passed down to us. And we had our NES down there, but there was like two couches and a wooden coffee table, and what was underneath that coffee table? Tons and tons of the Nintendo Powers we had. Like every time we got a new issue, it would go under the coffee table, and I just remember it vividly right now. Remember sitting on the couch reading the Mike Tyson Nintendo Power, and I want to say, wasn't there a cover with him, or they were either it was a cover or they were talking about Punch Out inside the magazine with tips and tricks on how to beat it. And I'll just never forget the stack over time, the stack of magazines under that table. I wish I can go back in time right now, Bill, and just sit at that couch and read through my Nintendo Powers. But that was life. That was the internet for us back then. That was how we consumed video game media, and a lot of it attributes to Nintendo Power. I guess since we're on Nintendo Power, they also made some commercials. I was trying to show here.
Yeah, I've been glancing at them. Yeah, they're pretty neat.
Yeah, they were pretty cool. They did some good marketing. Here is the first issue with the claymation kind of cover, and it obviously resembled the last issue, which I thought was cool, like full circle. But look how beautiful it was from the title, Nintendo Power, just the logo, just like it like just stood out. It was so powerful in my eyes. Let's see. We could flip through what's great about, and just so everyone knows, you could go to archive.org, and we could literally pick one of these Nintendo Powers, and we could actually go through them. Someone was nice enough to actually, these are scanned, by the way. These are scanned digital. And now, the beauty of the design, when I started to get into the Powers, and Bill, you would see the level design on the page, because that was the way they were able to describe the levels for you.
Yeah.
That was kind of like just probably one of the biggest things I remember is just looking at these levels. And look at this beautiful like attention to detail. And from what I understand is that these were produced in Japan. And then they were local, like they would make these in Japan for America, and then they would be sent over to the U.S. and distributed. But whatever team was putting these together, their attention to detail was unbelievable. I mean, look at this beautiful stuff here.
Yeah, the artwork is gorgeous, and you can tell they were doing a lot of original drawings as well, right? Because they may not have. It's probably the time before assets from a company, so. Yeah, I mean, just flipping through it, they're gorgeous, right? This is, you can tell, and as a kid, imagine getting this as a kid.
And you're just blown away.
Man, yeah, just blown away. Just kind of this sensory overload is really incredible.
And hey, Mr. Flight. Hey, Katie. Thanks for stopping by the cafe. Hello. Nice to see y'all. Yeah, it was fantastic. So we could pick a issue here. We'll go to another issue in the 90s. Nintendo Power issue. This issue came out in March 11th, 1990. Let's see. Let's go back to, this is really, and by the way, again, everyone, it's archive.org. You can actually go Google Nintendo Archive and it'll pull this stuff up. And it's just like, so if you don't want to pay money for all those old Nintendo Powers, you could just pull them up here and we could digitally go through them. Mr. Flight says, as a kid, big geek out for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, look at the colored pages too. I mean, this wasn't cheap to print.
No. It's amazing. It really is amazing. And this really caught a lot of people by surprise. And I'm looking at a lot of the maps as well. Like somebody had to go in and piece together those maps, those level constructions. It's an insane amount of work. And look, we got oh man, here we go. This is this the Ninja Gaiden?
This is Ninja Gaiden, yeah.
The guide? Yeah. I remember this one. I have this one too. Oh man. And again, the artwork is just stunning.
Cool. Yeah. The Act 1 of Ninja Gaiden.
Yeah. They're really cool. I'm sure I have again these sitting in my mom's basement, hopefully protected by dust. That's my hope is that they've been preserved,
I only have
naturally preserved.
I have a scattered collection of my magazines. I think most of them are in the garbage, to be honest, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate. Um,
They're in a part of the basement where nobody would know and recognize it right now. like no one would think to go back there and look for anything. I know exactly where they are. And next time I'm in Jersey, I'm definitely have to take a trip to my mom's house to see if I can unearth those little treasures.
yeah, and there's something like, look at this commercial. It's so like early '90s, right? It's just like, but there was something like Nintendo Power captured the '90s too, because yeah, it came out in the late '80s, but I feel like it really hit its stride in the early '90s. You know, like
Yes. Yes.
it
Yep.
was that was when things were just rolling in the video game world. You know,
Yeah.
and obviously they had a hotline you could call to order them, and yeah, just can't get enough Nintendo Power. Now, I do want to mention a couple of older magazines. And have you ever heard of Atari Age?
I've heard of it, but I've never read it.
So I heard and I watched a great video last night to prep for this episode by the Angry Video Game Nerd. About 2 years ago, he did a feature on gaming magazines, and he said that Atari Age was pretty bad. And a good example is this is a Q&A with Pac-Man. Like on this page, the Atari Age interviews Pac-Man, because Pac-Man is not a real person, Bill,
No.
but this is filled with Pac-Man puns. Okay,
Oh
so
no.
let's see. I forget. I'd have to find one, but the whole idea is that you're interviewing Pac-Man.
And look at the layout of this. And here's a good example of why Nintendo Power works so well. The layout of this is so sterile. It's white backgrounds.
Looks like a
It's
newspaper.
it looks like a newspaper. Yeah, look at this. And what kid is going to look at this and be like, "Ooh, I'm stoked for Maze Craze. Let me put that on the list." It just wasn't as vibrant.
A
And
little
man, was
too
Nintendo
adult.
Power. Yeah, exactly. Right. It just didn't quite understand. Yeah, I think they were kind of bridging that gap between computer and video game at that point, because computer magazines were always like this.
Yeah.
That's probably where this kind of steez came from.
So Nintendo Power comes out, and then there's other unbiased video game magazines that were produced, right? Have you ever heard of Game Players magazine?
That I've never heard of. Never heard of that one.
So this is
That's
one
cool.
that I kind of read, but now you're seeing, and what I want to focus here is this is a non-Nintendo produced
Right. Mm-hmm.
magazine, which has a slew of different consoles, and there might be a Nintendo in here, but there was a difference because we were talking about propaganda. Nintendo was producing their own magazine. Some other companies did that too, like Dreamcast had a magazine, PSM, PlayStation magazine, list goes on. But I think, did you, Bill, prefer, I mean, besides Nintendo Power, did you like the unbiased magazines, like the EGMs of the world, like these types?
Yeah.
Like when they came into the fold, it really just brought more variety to you being able to check different things out.
Yeah, and I love that advert right there on the left-hand side. That's cool. The face blowing back by the power of video games. I was a Game Pro kid, just because that's what my mom got me. I was like, oh, I want a game magazine that's not Nintendo Power. So I got both. I had Nintendo Power and then I had Game Pro. And I think it was one of those things like I paid for it with allowance. My mom just got it for me. And yeah, I remember loving it because I could experience other things, but it was also very vital in my battle in the Bit Wars, because then I could look at the game that was like Mortal Kombat and see the two reviews in the same issue. Like, oh, see, the Super Nintendo has a 5.0 graphic factor and the Genesis is a 4.0. Then I can argue with my friends at school about the benefits and pros and cons of each one. But it was cool because even though I didn't have the systems, it was nice to see what other people were playing, what was available. So again, it gave me a broad spectrum of experience, even though I didn't again have those systems, because we were a Nintendo house first and foremost. So
Yeah, and this you're seeing is called Video Games and Computer Entertainment Magazine, issue 52, May 1993.
oh wow,
This is another magazine that a lot of people don't remember, but I kind of do. And then we're also, of course, you were just talking about GamePro, which I love their covers. They were very crazy. Like they were just intense covers.
Yes.
This is GamePro issue number 74, September of 1995. And what a good year 1995 was. 94, 95, great year for movies. You got 1994 was Pulp Fiction, Clerks, whatever. So you're getting into the mid 90s, some of the best eras for nostalgia, and these magazines attest to that. What
Yeah.
was it? So you were talking about GamePro. So GamePro was your favorite magazine outside of Nintendo Power, probably, right?
Yeah, yeah. I had friends who had EGM. I think Joey, my friend Joey, had EGM, and I'd read them and I'd like them a lot. But again, GamePro was what came through in the mail, so that's what I had, and I really enjoyed them. Again, it had all, and what I really like about GamePro and Nintendo Power started doing this too is they really focused on the specs of games, especially during the bit wars, and especially when we started getting to the 32-bit era. It was all about specs. The Super Nintendo can push 16.9 million colors, and the Genesis has 32,000, and this sound chip and this processor speed. And this, as a growing, tech dork, that stuff fascinated me. That was super interesting to me. And it was beautiful. And even like the advertisements were just really, really cool and edgy. And
Well,
you felt like there was a battle being waged between the different companies.
Have you noticed that there's an advertisement almost on every page? I mean,
Yes.
that is one thing about these magazines is that they had a ton. Oh, I'm losing the. There we go. They had a ton of every page is like, look at that, The Tick, Fox cartoon TV show. Oh, great show, by the way. Also, if you liked Venture Brothers, a fun fact people don't realize is that they made this show. The two guys who created Venture Brothers.
I didn't know that.
Did not know that. The Tick animated series was created by the Venture Brother guys, and I think you could connect the dots because it's very similar in style. Venture Brothers is one of my favorite cartoons of all time.
Classic.
So this is GamePro. Let me pull back here. There's a lot of iconic covers here. Let's see. I'm trying to find. This is a good time when Tomb Raider came out. This is 97. This is Tomb Raider 2, I think. Oh man, look. There's a hockey ad here for
there you go.
Good old hockey game. Face Off, 98. Never played it, but
I never played that either. How weird.
I remember it though, but I never played it. Look at all these. Oh my god, that crazy TV. Look at that thing.
Yes, 21 watts, piercing your eardrums. Love it.
Love it.
It's so good.
And then I mentioned to you that there was a GamePro TV show.
Yeah. Oh my god.
This is so 90s. It's not even. It's gonna hurt your eyes. It's so 90s.
I can't even. This is my rabbit hole for today. Just time wasted digging into this. Oh man.
Look, he's at Blockbuster.
Put this in my veins. I read all of this. This is so good.
So full circle. This is JD Roth. Okay, and JD Roth ended up currently today. He's a big time unscripted producer. He created a company called 3Ball, and they're the ones who started Biggest Loser. So JD Roth ended up, because I worked in entertainment and reality TV. I worked for this guy. I worked for his company 3Ball on a show that was supposed to come out for Spike TV called oh God, what was it called? It was a Jillian Michaels, the exercise enthusiast, but it was Shark Tank for exercising. So someone would be come in and pitch like their ab roller or whatever. The show aired twice. And that was it. And it got canceled.
Wow.
But JD Roth was the executive producer, and today he's still a pretty big producer in the unscripted world. So
cool.
So full circle there. JD Roth was a host in the late 80s, 90s. Also, I told you there was a show called Funhouse, and JD Roth was a host of that. So full circle for me. And he's a really cool guy.
That's awesome.
That's the other side of it. And he's a really wealthy guy now. So full circle
Very
there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So that's a TV show GamePro if people haven't heard of it. Now, of course, we got to talk about Electronic Gaming Monthly, or EGM, which
absolutely
I think I don't know, would you say that EGM was more popular than GamePro, or was they kind of like going head to head?
They were kind of head to head. I think GamePro was geared to a younger audience, and EGM was geared to a slightly older. EGM is where you feel like you get your real reviews. I believe they reviewed out of a 10 scale, where GamePro would review. They had the 4 different categories, like fun factor, graphics, sound, and control, I think. And then each one of them was on a 5-point scale. And I think EGM went with more of a traditional, just kind of a 1 to 10 rating. But I always remember EGM being a little more of like a meteor magazine with like better reviews and such, where GamePro again was a little more flashy. All of them, of course, with crazy advertisements. One of my most recent episodes from 2 weeks ago, I spoke with Greg Stewart, who was the previews editor for EGM around the 90s. And he was telling me lots of stories about behind the scenes at EGM, cover stories that had to be changed last minute because something fell through, and kind of how the editorial works at GamePro. Sorry, at EGM. It was very interesting, especially how like they decide on covers. They know certain games would always get covers, like a Tony Hawk game. You always get a cover. Mortal Kombat, always on the cover. But sometimes companies would come to them and say, "Hey, could this game get a cover?" And they'd have to make that decision. But what was very interesting when speaking to Greg was the editorial, the previews, and the reviews were completely separate from sales.
Huh.
There was a brick wall. So they had all freedom to rate or review a game. An example he brings up was State of Emergency. They had to put that on the
game. Rockstar game.
Yep. And they had to put that on the cover last minute. And if you listen to the episodes, you'll hear the story. It's pretty good. They had to put that on the cover last minute. And State of Emergency ends up getting like a 6.5. So you have this cover story that, and you have advertisements for it, but then the review comes out 6.5, which is why when you read these magazines, you'll see a review for, Siberia, which is a terrible game, and it's got a terrible rating, but then the next page has an ad for it because the two sides never met. So, which actually leads into that journalistic integrity, that we don't have as much of these days, especially in influencer culture where you don't have that wall anymore. How can you trust somebody who got a game for free to be really objective about it?
Yeah.
But in those days, their walls were there, and he can't speak for other magazines, but at least the EGM, he had full freedom to write the review he wanted and not catch flack for it. Even though sometimes he would, he told a story of how sometimes they would give the game a poor review, and then that developer would come back and say, "Why did you give this review? We just spent a bunch of money advertising with you. Why'd you give it this score?" And then they'd have to defend it. And in EGM, at least, they were always allowed to defend it, and the editorial always won. It's like, well, that's what the game got. So
yeah, and I think there was conspiracy with rating games in the mid-90s, I forget, about getting paid to like rate games and stuff, and that was a whole problem. By the way, this is State of Emergency, which you reminded me. This was a Rockstar game, and I think everyone was so pumped about this, and then it turned out to be just like kind of like okay. It was
a very average game. It's not great.
Not doesn't really give the Rockstar, it wasn't. I was expecting more. But wow, I need to look for this one actually. I wonder how much it garners these days, but really forgotten game, I guess. I'm gonna have to listen to that episode, man. That sounds like a good one.
It's a fun listen for sure. Yeah.
So before we kind of end the show here, I want to talk about Barnes and Noble. Do you have a connection to Barnes and Noble in doing this, going to their magazine rack? Do you remember that culture?
Absolutely. My mom would be, walking around Barnes and Noble, or sometimes go to a neighboring store, plunk me down there, and I'm just starting to flick through magazines, like a little mini library I didn't have to pay anything for. And once in a while I would buy a magazine like, oh, I really need this one. This has like Mortal Kombat on the cover. I really need this, and bring it home. But yeah, that culture of the video game magazine section was always really, really fun. Lots of possibilities. That's what those represented for me.
Yeah, this represents a lot of just me going in there at even during college. I had a Barnes and Noble near me, and I would just go and spend a good hour just looking through the magazines that didn't have the seal around them, because you had you couldn't open those and read them. You had to buy them.
That's right.
So I would pull the ones of those I would want to buy, because I would have to buy those, but I would spend hours just like sitting in Barnes & Noble reading. And what's interesting, in 2020, and there are still Barnes & Nobles around, a lot of them closed down. They stopped selling magazines in 2020.
It's a bummer. I didn't know that.
So that's one thing, to kind of come to a close. There's a few topics here I want to talk about. The existence of magazines today and how they are experienced. And where was, like, what happened to magazines? Was it because the digital frontier and the way we consume editorial now is all on the internet? Do you think that's what killed the magazine? And is the magazine dead? Because when's the last time you actually held the magazine?
It's been a while. It's been a while. I have two kids. I have no room for anything. So every inch of space is precious. I think digital definitely kind of broke it. I think digital didn't break it, I don't think, in the way most people think. Because a lot of people think convenience, right? You just download the magazine, you download it onto an iPad or tablet or your computer. I think just the competition got bigger. The space, the amount of information available to us now is vast. Where in the 90s, your magazine was it. That's how you knew what the greatest games were coming out.
That's all we had.
So it just the competition grew, and it is much more convenient to go on a blog or on a site and just read the article, as opposed to a magazine. But man, I really think we're missing out. I think print media is really awesome because, like a podcast, it's so intimate. You're sitting there with a magazine. That's all you're looking at. There's no phone alerting to you. There's no Slack message on your computer. There's no constant ads and distractions. We live in a world where we're constantly companies are vying for our attention at all times. And we have a magazine, you're just sitting with it. And it's just you and that magazine and you experiencing it yourself. And the tactility of it, just flipping pages and gosh, even the sound, right?
The sound, the smell of the paper. I know it sounds weird, but it did have a smell. It
does sound weird. It does sound weird, but it was an experience as opposed to just ingesting information. You were having an experience, a one-on-one experience with a piece of physical media. And that is something that's not replicated online. And again, it's great. Obviously the internet's great. We're on the internet. We create our content on the internet. It's awesome. But the print media is definitely something that's a shame that's really kind of dying or has died. So
yeah, and what I have on screen here is IGN's website in 2003. And to me, when you started for video games, IGN, I'm not a big fan of IGN these days, I'll be honest with you, but back in the day, they were like one of the first ones to really have I remember they had separate sites for each console. So they had N64 IGN. They even had a Dreamcast IGN. But this is a good start of how we consume news. And I think that one of the biggest places right now for video game news is Twitter. I am seeing trailers. I see announcements. I learn all my video game news kind of quickly on Twitter. Yeah. And that's if you're on Twitter. But I know a lot of video game people are using Twitter these days, especially retro gamers. But modern gamers are using it like crazy. So Twitter, in so many ways, has kind of become my source for news first. And then I'll go to the article, Twitter first, article second. Yeah. But it's a shame, and I'll give you one thing I noticed recently. I flew to Florida, and the little shops or convenience stores inside the airport lounge or whatever, and they had a magazine section. And I remember looking recently, and I was like, there's not one single video game magazine. There's not one. There was one electronics magazine. And you know what it was? It was Wired magazine, which was the only thing close. Yeah. And Wired was a fun magazine in its very good magazine. Great magazine. Mm-hmm. But it saddened me to see that there was just no video game magazines. I was even considering buying one at the airport. I was like, man, I remember when I used to, before getting on a plane, I'd ask my dad to buy me this magazine so I had something to read on the plane. We didn't have TVs on the plane like we do today, right? And I would read front to back on a plane a video game magazine. And it was fun. Did you ever do that? Did you ever actually read front to back on a Nintendo Power? Did you read everything?
Oh, every word multiple times. You were talking about the stack of magazines by the couch. We had same thing. They had a little nightstand, but a little end table. And inside the end table was full of Nintendo Powers and Game Pros. And if I was just sitting hanging out, I just grab one and just start flicking through it and reading it. But I would read those things cover to cover. There was every inch of it was scoured for sure. Because I knew I wasn't getting another one for a month, right? So this is my source of print entertainment for a while. So, yeah, no, absolutely,
man. This whole episode has really really hit me in the heartstrings today.
Vice Project Doom, look at that. That's awesome.
This was a video. This guy did his top 10 Nintendo Powers of all time. This is an interesting one, the Star Trek one.
I remember that one. Yep.
Yeah,
I remember that one.
This is a good one. Let's see. Then there's the Mickey one. Do you remember this one?
Yep, absolutely. That was I think that was a 50th or 100th episode or 100th. I think it was an anniversary edition, I think.
He was talking about, actually, I watched this whole video last night, but he was talking about this fold out of like what a room looked like in the 90s. That is so me in the
It's so
90s.
good. So
That
good. Yep.
brings it all back. And I was, I'm watching on this retro gaming stuff lately. Obviously, I'm a retro gaming content creator, but like it saddens me that like even though everyone says, but kids of today in the future, they're going to look back at PS5 and Xbox Series X and they're going to think it's retro, but I still don't think it has the vibe that we got in our generation. I don't think so. And someone's argued with me that that's not true. They're going to feel the same way you do, and that might be true. But they didn't have Nintendo powers. They didn't have we didn't have the luxury of the internet, which I think was an advantage to the way we consumed nostalgia. Am I crazy? Yeah. I just
no, you're not wrong. I think kids these days will look back on their old systems with fondness because there's going to be a connection to them. But retro isn't a time period; it's an aesthetic. In my opinion, it's an art, it's a style, it's a design, it's a look, it's a feel. It's a game choice. That's why you'll have retro games that are modern, like retro inspired games. Because again, it's a modern game, but it's using pixel art and it's using, chiptune sounds, and it's maybe more traditional platforming than 3D space. So it's an aesthetic, and I don't think that's ever going away because there is something timeless about the simplistic beauty of graphics from this era of the 16-bit and 8-bit era. It's I could wax poetic about it, but there's something just beautiful and timeless about that. That I don't think future consoles are going to have that kind of. They're not going to age as well.
I can't see someone in 20 years from now saying, "Oh man, remember the PS5 and remember this?" I'd be like, "But what was okay? Do you remember when Cyberpunk was horrible on PS5?" Yes, I do because I played it on PS5. But I can't think about it in 20 years from now like anyone giving it the love we gave a Nintendo Power or an NES. I just don't feel like it's there. No. And you're right. It's an aesthetic. It's an era in our history. It's so crazy, man. It hurts me every day when I just see all that stuff. It's like, here we are idolizing our past and really loving this culture, but we'll never get it the way it was. We'll never. I don't think so. I don't think ever. I don't think so.
It won't be. So. And I think, like, to your point about the PS5 and such, there's too many things competing. Again, like I was talking to my buddy Joey on one of the shows, when we got in the car to go on a trip, we had a Game Boy. That was it. Maybe some books. You had a Game Boy. If you got 2 games a year, Christmas and birthday, and that was it. So there was that personal connection where now you have everything. Like the entire vault is open to you. And while I do think we are in that golden age of gaming now because everything is available to you, like you can experience all the eras, you're never going to have that connection because a kid growing up now has a PS5, a phone, a computer, and constant, again, things vying for his or her attention. Back in our day, in this era, there wasn't as much, so we were able to create those personal connections to the era, where these days, I don't think it's more of an entertainment. And to be honest, the advancement of game graphics is becoming more iterative as opposed to these sea changes. So the graphics of a PS4 and a PS5 and a PS10, they'll be better and better experiences, but not exponentially, where 16 to 32 or 8 to 16 was exponentially different. Because the technology is getting so mature, I can't imagine it being like something where I think I talked myself to a corner, but I don't think it doesn't have that kind of impact anymore because it's just not advancing like that.
Oh man, it's a sad time, but not a loving time. It's not like depressing. Okay, I'm just saying.
No,
it's I just wish we could just go back in time.
This is a great time to be a gamer, though, in my opinion, because again, everything's available to you.
Yeah.
Everything's you want to recreate. Just look back and experience games for the first time, like experience retro games like you did as a kid. You can definitely go back and play those games. And you can play modern games that have that aesthetic. You can play AAA titles and have these wonderful experiences. Everything's there. So I think right now is that golden era. But as far as going back in time, man, that was a time capsule, and it's fun to look back at it and just think on it. And that's why I like telling these stories in my podcast, because it just gives people an opportunity to look back with fondness on those days that are gone and understand that they're not coming back. But that's okay, because there's new things coming in the future that are maybe not as cool as Nintendo Power, but different, and different for us in our current sensibilities.
Yeah, and hey, you're right. I can't be depressed about it, but doing this content every day, it's like, wow, here we are. But that's what's created. That's what I love about like retro gaming content creators. It's become a thing. It's like we're all connecting on the same things that we all grew up on, and
Yeah.
that's special. That being said, man, we're closing in on the hour here. I hope you had a great time. I'm really glad you came on, and I hope you had a great time with me today.
Absolute blast. Thank you so much thanks for having me. And yeah, man, this is absolute blast. Pull me in from the bullpen if you ever need somebody last minute.
I might, yes. Last week, actually, I had a guest drop out, but I had the wonderful Crunchy Kong, who you might know from Twitter.
Yes, absolutely.
Come on. And I know you also joined in on the Stamp to Cancer Mario Kart event, which we're hoping, and I'll kind of nudge Retro Game Brews to make that an annual thing, I think. That was super fun.
Let's go.
We did a lot of great things that night, and that was just so much fun.
That was awesome.
But yeah, everyone, thanks so much who stopped by for the live. Remember, let me just make sure you guys can find him. It's your Twitter handle is a gamer looks at 40. Also check out his podcast. I believe you're on everything, right? iTunes,
all the things, yeah,
all the things podcast relevant. But yeah, man, I loved shooting the shit with you today, and thanks for having me on your show as well.
Yeah, man.
Really appreciate it. Other than that, I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. I don't see a lot of my buddies online today, so we're not going to actually raid anyone today. I'm gonna pass on the raid because I don't see a lot of my friends. I like to raid my friends. Sometimes I'm like, we'll raid someone random, but today we're just gonna keep it simple. And just going to let everyone know that we do have another guest next week. We have a few guests coming up the next few weeks, so we've been lucky, Bill, to have a bunch of guest hosts on. Sometimes it's just me on here, and that's fine too, but it's always great to have someone like you on to talk about perspective. Thanks, Mr. Flight. Thanks, everyone that stopped by for the live. Thanks all at VOD, and we'll see you next Saturday on CafeBTW, a morning gaming podcast. Thanks so much, Bill. We'll see you next time.
Yep, so long.
All right. Constellation prize is a trip to Orlando, Florida to appear on Double Dare. No, I'm just kidding. That's not. All right. Nice. See you, everyone.